Thank you, John. We have two speakers tonight, and this is a tradition that we've done. It's a long tradition in AA. They used to have two speakers, used to be a male and female. They used to, like, they were married together. Let's not do it this time, but, and I have to tell you my favorite story about that. There was a woman in AA named Lucy Harris, and she sponsored lots of people, Harvey, Jack Cleary, Tom Hooper, all these people. And she had a husband named Mac, and they were doing this dog and pony show, as they used to call it. And they were doing it out in East Texas, maybe Terrell or Kaufman or one of those places. And Lucy went first, and she's talking and she's talking and she's talking some more. And finally, she sits down after like 50 minutes. And she says to Mac, "I'm so sorry, but I had them in the palm of my hand. They were eating out of my fingers. I didn't know what else to do." And Mac looked at her and said, "Well, your blouse is unbuttoned to the navel." Hopefully that won't happen today. I'm going to start with introducing Steve. Steve is, I sponsor Steve, and he's one of those people who, no matter how long he's been sober, when I suggest he do something, he does it. He doesn't even ask me any questions, he just does it. And that is such a great testament to anybody who's been in AA, because I know when my sponsor asks me to do something, I find about 4 reasons I shouldn't have to do it, but the thing I need to do is start learning to do it. So, Steve, come on up and help us.
Thanks, Michael. Steve and I'm an alcoholic. Pronouns he and him. I'm not the female speaker up here tonight, although I do have some feminine qualities, and we won't go into that in a meeting. I'm oddly nervous tonight, and I've been oddly nervous all day today. I think it's because of that thing, and I'm going to go back through and read all the comments that are scrolling through, so please be kind. I don't really have a remarkable story, except that it happened to me, and so that makes it important. And I was born, I'm not going to go through my whole story. I'm going to kind of treat this like a really long share. I've always wanted to be able to share in a meeting for like 20 minutes, and so I'm going to do that tonight. I'm not going to tell my whole story, but just the highlights. I was born in East Texas, and that explains a lot about not only my accent, but the way that I was raised. And I had really a lovely family. The only dysfunction in my family was me. And I realize now that I tried to control that family with my behavior. And, if I didn't get the amount of attention that I felt like I deserved, I would do something bad. And that kind of followed me throughout my life and into sobriety, and that's one of the things that I learned to stop doing in sobriety was, trying to control my parents and to guilt them into giving me things and, doing things for me financially and otherwise. But, I had a lovely family, and I really appreciate that now. And, I try to tell my mom a lot that, I had a good childhood, because overall it was good. Except that I needed a drink in about the first grade. And I remember in junior high, I had gotten some codeine, and this was the 70s, so they gave you drugs all the time. I was in 5th or 6th grade and got some codeine cough syrup. And I, took some swigs of that one day and really enjoyed it and made junior high a lot better. And I used to get stomach aches a lot, and so I would get paregoric, which had, I don't know what it has, opium or something in it. And, I would, my mom would say, "You've got to stop taking so much of that because I have to sign for it at the pharmacy, and they'll think I'm an addict." And, my doctor, when I was a little kid, told my mom to be careful because I had an addictive personality. And I can become addicted to anything. Right now it's Lululemon pants, and it's really easy for me to buy Lululemon pants because all the skinny bitches get all the ones, and then the size that I wear is always available. And So I've been looking for something to fix me for a long time. And when I had my first drink, it's hard for me to pinpoint my first drink because my parents drank. And I would take swigs out of my parents' beer. And I remember my first kind of time that I got tipsy was when I was in first grade and I went to a wedding and had champagne cocktails. I was supposed to be bringing my mom champagne cocktails, but I would go get one, then I would drink it, and then I would go get another and bring it to her. And she's like, kept saying, "Why is it taking you so long?" And I only had maybe one or two, but I remember feeling really good at that party, at that wedding reception. I just lost my train of thought. When I got into high school, I was older than my classmates because I was born in the summer, and most of them were, I was almost a year older than some of them. And I was able to get liquor at the liquor store pretty easily because I looked older than I was. Now I look younger than I am, but so I had liquor a lot, and it made me more popular when I drank. And I don't know if that was because it let down my inhibitions and I was a nicer person, or if people, liked me better when I drank. I don't really know what it was, but there was a correlation there, and I internalized that. And I also internalized some other stuff growing up, that sometimes you have to hide your alcohol consumption, because my parents, it was kind of weird the way that I grew up. We went to First Baptist Church, but my parents were members of the country club. And so they would go to the country club and drink on Saturday night, and then we would all get up and go to church on Sunday. And so one time there were people at the country club from the church, and my mom wasn't drinking at the country club on that Saturday night because there were people from the church there. And so that taught me that you have to hide your alcohol consumption sometimes from some people. And I was good at hiding things. I learned from the best. And I hope my mom's not watching this. I don't think she is, but it would be crazy if she was. So, I went to college and majored in New Wave and punk, and I tried to get into a fraternity, and none of the fraternities wanted me, probably because I got so drunk and I did mushrooms at the rush parties, and it's hard to carry on a conversation with a pledge wannabe when they're tripping on mushrooms, and so I didn't get any pledges, and so I didn't get any bids, and I still have a little bit of a resentment about that even today. But I did find a group of friends in college, and I had fun for 3 years, and then I got kicked out for bad grades, and lived in Austin for a couple of years. And please, somebody remind me when I've been up here 20 minutes. I forgot to set my timer. Moved to Austin. Had a really pretty good job for 1988 in Austin, and that's in 1990 was where I hit my bottom. I tried to commit suicide a couple of times down there, and that was troubling to my family, and they don't know about all of the suicide attempts. She's not on there, but they know about the one where I missed work the next day, and because they called my mom and were like, "Do you know where he is?" And she called my house, and I was just waking up from trying to commit suicide, and I went home and thought about going to rehab, and but my parents wanted to send me to Christian rehab, and I didn't really want to go to there, because I knew they'd probably try to make me not gay, and I was having too much fun being gay, and I was having too much fun doing drugs, quite frankly, and drinking, and I lost everything and hit a huge bottom in Austin in April and May of 1990. And had to move home and live with my parents. And that was humbling. And I white-knuckled it and didn't go to any meetings and didn't, because I didn't know that meetings were an option, and there weren't any meetings in Winsboro, Texas, that I knew of. And so I white-knuckled it, and I was angry, and, I look back on that, and that was a really bad year. I didn't work that whole year. I mean, I did some work on my dad's farm, but, I didn't have a job or a W-2 or anything like that whole year. And then in 91, my mom's company, they gave me a job, and I went back to school. And I had a 1.8 when I started back to school the second time. And when I graduated, I had a 3.0, 3 point something, I can't remember, 3.1. And I realized that I'm really good at school when I'm not doing drugs and drinking all the time. And so I went to graduate school because I decided I wanted to be a college professor. And this was in the 90s when I decided that. And I went to graduate school for a couple of years, and everything was going so good. I thought, I still drank some, but I didn't, I blacked out a couple of times. And when I blacked out the second time, when I started back drinking heavily again, things were going so good, I thought I could handle it. And I thought that the problem was that I was in Austin, or the problem was that, I was with the wrong crowd of people when I was drinking. And, now that I am older, surely I can make it work. I can do X and cocaine recreationally. And I found out that I could not do it recreationally. I left college because college got in the way of drinking and drugging, and moved to Dallas and took a hostage with me. And I moved him from his parents' house into my house. And that was, he was legal, don't get me wrong, but barely legal. And I was a lot younger then, obviously. This was in 96. And so I moved to Dallas, and now I look back on it, and it was God putting me where I needed to be when I moved to Dallas. I didn't realize it at the time, but I moved to Dallas in June of 96, and in January of 97, I got sober. So my life descended pretty quickly down in those 6 months. I had been dating this guy that was in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I had been going to therapy too with a lady who said, kept saying, you need to probably think about going to Alcoholics Anonymous. And I didn't really know about Alcoholics Anonymous much. I knew that Ann Landers talked about it. And she seemed to like it, but I thought that it was not really for me. I wanted to go to Betty Ford and meet some celebrities and, eat some holistic food or whatever they serve out there. And, now I've heard that Betty Ford is not all that fabulous, that it's a nice rehab, but it's not, a spa. That's what I was wanting to go to. I wanted to go to a spa and have my parents pay off all my bills, and so I could come back and start with a clean slate. And that's not what happened. I went to 2727 Oak Lawn and shook and was resentful and would storm out of meetings and look over my shoulder to see if anybody was following me out of the meeting to come and get me. And I loved that place. It was a shithole, but I love it. And I had some good times getting sober there in 97. And, I've been through a lot of different sponsors, and, each one of them has taught me something that I needed to know about myself. And, I'm not going to try to go through all. If I had more time, I would go through all the steps that I've done. But, the one that I did, the first one was, of course, step one. And, when I read in the doctor's opinion, I think it's where it is, about the allergy. And I was like, that means that I'm not a morally corrupt person. Now, I was morally corrupt, but that was not why I drank and did drugs. I drank and did drugs because I had a disease. And, I understood the concept of a disease, and that this was my medicine for that disease. And it sort of took the burden off of me and was I was able to put that burden on God and AA. And I pray every morning that God relieves me of the desire and compulsion to drink and do drugs. And I've started every morning before I turn on Morning Joe doing a little meditation. And believe me, lately I've needed a little meditation before I turn on Morning Joe. This political show, Patrick knows what it is. I have started meditating some and reading from the Daily Reflection. And, Alcoholics Anonymous has given me everything that I have. I went back to school. I got my master's at SMU. I had a full ride at SMU, actually, for a master's, which saved me a whole lot of money, which was nice. And then I had worked for the federal government for a while, and I'm going to end it in just a couple of minutes. And then I got laid off from that job. I didn't think that the federal government laid anybody off, but they do. Thanks, Obama. And I was like, I wish I could get all that money back that I gave him. I was working at a recruiting firm, and I was doing pretty good. I mean, I actually was a pretty good recruiter, but I didn't like being on the phone all the time. And I was thinking to myself one day at my table, at my desk, at my house, I was like, why is it that I can't find what it is that, why can't I find this job that I'm supposed to be doing? And this thought came into my head, it's because you're not doing what you're supposed to be doing. And I was like, well, and it was not like a voice, I'm not schizophrenic or anything, but it was just like a feeling that came over me. And I'm like, maybe I really should explore this going back to school and getting my PhD. And so I emailed the lady that I had been, who taught at the school where I got my undergrad, and said, what would I need to do to get my PhD? What would I need to do to see about getting in out there? And she said, well, it would be really easy. All you need to do is fill out an application, and I'll give you a job and free tuition, and, just come, and you've got a place. And so I did that, and I had to live in East Texas again for 4 years, and that almost killed me. I live in a small town, but this town was a shithole that I lived in. No offense if anybody is from Commerce, but it's a shithole. And the school's good, but the town sucks. And there was only one AA meeting, and the same guy chaired the meeting every day. And he would share for like 10 minutes every time. And so I kind of quit going to meetings. And there was another meeting in Greenville that was good because you could smoke in that meeting. And I didn't really smoke, but I like to be around people who smoke. And so I didn't go to that many meetings. And when I got back to Dallas after I graduated with my doctorate, I was pretty crazy. And John P. was sponsoring me at the time. And I just remember I was nuts because I hadn't been going to meetings. And so, I got the job that I really wanted in the school that I really wanted to work at, and I'm still there today. And they seem to like me, and I seem to like them. And, I'm still in Alcoholics Anonymous. I still go to a lot of meetings, even after 24 years. And I've gotten a lot of material things from Alcoholics Anonymous, but the best thing that I've gotten is myself. I've learned how to love myself. It makes me uncomfortable to even say that. And it makes me uncomfortable to think that I actually do love myself, because I hated myself for a really long time. And I think that I tried to destroy myself with alcohol and drugs, and it didn't work. But this works. So I always end by reading the promises, the 9th step promises, so I'm going to do that again tonight. If we are painstaking about this phase of our development, we will be amazed before we are halfway through. We are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity, and we will know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Are these extravagant promises? We think not. They are being fulfilled among us, sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly. They will always materialize if we work for them. And so one of the promises, or one of the things that I get from Alcoholics Anonymous is the opportunity to sponsor people. And I've sponsored Paul, how many years now has it been? 5? I can't remember dates. All I know is it's been a while, and I've taken Paul through the steps one time, and it was a really great experience working the steps with him because he's so diligent about his work and about doing the work that's required in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it was a joy to go through the steps with someone who's been through the steps before, but you see them getting to a new level of understanding about themselves and about the program. And so Paul is going to share for the rest of the time tonight. So thanks.
Paul, I'm an alcoholic. I was actually thinking about earlier today about like one of my first memories with Steve Whitley, and I've been in the program twice. I came in 2005 and then a second time in 2008, and I remember the 6 o'clock newcomer meeting was like in this like small room, like off to the side with like these like sliding accordion walls. And if you were like new, it was the place to be. And like every single fucking seat was filled. And if you got there late, there was not a seat. And I was brand new. And like, of course I was late. And I walked in and like, I'm seeing people. I'm like, that bitch has 5 years. Why is she in this room? And I just like, I was like looking around. And then I was like, oh, God, there's no like whatever. And then I went in the big room, which was like, you didn't really want to be in that room. And like, there was like nobody there, and I'm on the back wall, and I just was like, just fucking pissed, because I'm like, I deserve to be in there. I have like 30 days. And I remember Steve Whitley was like maybe 20 feet away. Like he was off on the side, and he looked over at me, and he goes, hey. And like he pats the seat next to him, like, come sit by me. And I was like, and he goes, fuck you. I just like started cracking up, but it was like exactly what I needed. And it's like, I think like whenever that happened, I like just fell in love with Steve Whitley. I think we get each other. My story, I'm gonna just kind of gloss over, the beginning of it. Basically, I was a self-loathing, gothic, like teenager. I hated myself. I was depressed. I never I knew right off the bat, like I was attracted to men. I had no trying to be straight. I knew from the very beginning that I was into guys and had literally nobody to speak to. I feel like gay teenagers now, like they actually have like such a network of like visibility, because I think the first like gay person that I remember seeing was when I went to Regis at Town East Mall, because I was like paying for my own haircuts when I was 17, and there was like some hairdresser, and I was like, oh my God, a gay person. But I didn't have like anybody to talk to about these feelings, and on top of that, like the topic of these feelings was like, you're going to hell, this is wrong. And, I just kept it to myself. And, I probably would have been depressed and self-loathing if I was straight. But that just kind of added to the situation. And I remember, a handful of times, like doing drugs and maybe smoking weed and drinking when I was in high school, but for the most part, I didn't really have friends, so I didn't really have that much access to it. And, my drinking career pretty much began after I had already graduated high school. I graduated in 2000, and the beginning of 2001, I went to my first rave and my first gay club, like the same month. And on both of those occasions, I dropped ecstasy and I got drunk. And instantly this just like liberation was just like unfolded. I was like, oh my God, like this is so cool. I'm around all these other people like myself, and I don't have to like put on this front. And, you know, that's a great feeling. It's unfortunate I had to have drugs and alcohol to feel it, but, you know, that was my story. And, you know, for me, I think because I was so sad and hated myself for so long, I had a little taste of something that could take that away. And of course, more of that would be better, right? And I just had a taste of something that I just wanted more of. And the funny thing is I like was a heavy like documentation person. Like I would catalog, like I would journal and like do art projects and like, I mean, like I just was very organized. And I actually have a journal where I cataloged January, like whatever weekend, ecstasy, 1 hit. February, second week of February, ecstasy, 1 hit. I would document because I wanted to keep track of the drugs I was doing. I also considered myself a person who like was like educated about the drugs I was doing. I would do research online. You know, people would be like at the like club and they'd be like, "Oh, do you want some G?" And I'd, "What is that?" And then before I would take it, I would research. So I really considered myself like an educated like drug user. And you know, I knew you don't mix ketamine with GHB. You know, that's going to be a bad time. And I think because that was kind of like my mode of like operating, like I thought this wasn't going to be a big deal. You know, I'm college age, you know, this is what college kids do. At the time, Queer as Folk had like just come out, and that was just kind of like my way of justifying it all. It's like, okay, well, this is what we do as grown gay men. And, you know, unfortunately, I didn't just do drugs for a good time. I did drugs to run away. And I started to do drugs, and you know, it would just that like line in the sand that I would draw for myself just kept getting pushed back more and more. Because at first I gave myself permission to do 1 hit of ecstasy a month, and then it started being, well, twice a month, and then you know, I'd try other drugs. And I would say, well, this is an ecstasy, so it's okay to do this once a weekend. And, you know, I started to have problems, and it's so funny, because I remember this person probably doesn't even remember saying this, but I remember it clear as day, because I think it may have been when I became pickled. You know, they talk about once you're an alcoholic, you know, you can't go back, just like you can't turn a pickle back into a cucumber. And I had totaled my car, and, you know, it was this like hoopty piece of shit car, but it's like all I had. And I remember, I think I like borrowed my brother's car or something. I went to the club, and like all these people are like doing drugs at this after party. And I was like, oh my God, I just need a bag of ketamine. I've had the worst weekend. I totaled my car. And one of the guys who's at the after party, he's like, whoa, 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 you don't do that. I'm like, what are you talking about? Because he was like spun on like crystal meth. He's like, you don't do that. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you do this for fun. You don't do it to like run away because you're having a bad day. And that just didn't click with me. I was like, what do you mean? Like, of course I'm justified in like running away today. I had a shitty day. And I think that's was around that period was when I really became pickled. You know, I didn't really have a problem with alcohol because when I was of that age, I always preferred drugs. And the people I was hanging out with, if they did drink, like I didn't really want to mix circles with them. I hung out with people who did drugs, and you know, it was like all the club drugs. For me, it was like fun, just experimenting and trying them all. And you know, so that was from like maybe 2001 to 2003, I think. And I had held off for the longest time with experimenting with crystal meth because I saw the social circles and everybody who I was with who did it, like their life was shit. I mean, it was just like, you didn't want anything to do with those people because they were just like sketchy and gross. And, I would come across it all the time and I would always say no until I didn't. And once I did, that was like the same little like bartering inside my head. Okay, well, you were up for 3 days this one weekend, but we're only going to do this once a month because it's such a, an endeavor. And, it just started being like once a month to like twice a month to 3 weeks to like only on the weekends to now it's just creeping back to like into the work week. As this happened, I started to just lose everything in my life that mattered. I lost vehicle, I lost jobs, I was losing quality friendships. My parents had kicked me out. And, somewhere along the way, I had this like motto, I guess you could say, was just that, no matter what, I'm going to be okay. Like, I'm going to feel okay no matter what that entails. So you can like disapprove of what I'm doing, but I'm going to be happy, and this I know will make me happy. And the problem is like you become dependent on it, and if you don't have it, then you're not happy. So you're constantly like chasing drugs. And I became a very low bottom addict. I was basically homeless for probably about like 6 months or so. My parents had kicked me out. I'd gone to rehab a couple times. I had ran away from rehab, and I was just like crash surfing with like other tweakers. And along the way, I had started dating this guy, and he was like not a drug addict. He wasn't an alcoholic, as far as I know. And he saw like that my life was just in total shambles. And, he would say, well, why don't you blah, blah, blah. And I would just be like, I want to, I don't know how to stop. And he'd be like, well, why don't you go to AA? And I was like, because I'm not an alcoholic, I'm a drug addict. And when we were in rehab, they made us go to AA meetings. And keep in mind, I'm like 22 at the time, going into this like gross ass room with like these men in their 50s who are straight complaining about their like wives and kids. And like when you're a crystal meth addict and like you've been like up for 5 days hearing that, it's not attractive, folks. But I had written off AA because of that. And this is, fast forward, this is like to 2005. And I think CMA in Dallas had like literally just started in April of 2005. I think like the Dallas Voice had like an article about it. He like, we met up one time, and he was just like, there's this new group. It's actually just like people for you. And I was like, I'm not doing AA. And he's like, well, no, it's actually for gay men, and it's for gay men who are crystal meth addicts. And, I also did not have a car. And I was like, well, I don't have a way to get there. And he's like, well, actually, it's within walking distance. He drew me a map on like a piece of paper. And, he left that there, and I probably kept tweaking for like a couple more months, but I kept that piece of paper, and I just kind of, thought about it. That little seed was planted. And, eventually I, had a bad enough crashing, whatever, and, I followed that map one time, and I think the meeting started at like 7, and I walked, and, this is when CMA was right next to Lambda on Butler, and, I was used to walking. I never walked down that area, and I remember walking like literally all the fucking way down till you hit like Harry Hines or whatever, and then coming back all the way back around, and I'm like looking for this sweet 320 or whatever the fuck it was, and finally I found it, and then I walked in, and it's like 5 minutes till the meeting ends, and I'm like spun the fuck out, and like we sit down, and it was a very small group. I think it was like less than 10 people, and I remember they were like going around the room with their sobriety dates, and they're like, "What's your sobriety date?" And I was like, "Well, like I did a bump 4 hours ago. I don't, I don't know like what to tell you." But that 5 little minutes of that meeting, it showed me hope. And trust me, with the people I was hanging out with, there was no hope. There was no future with these people. These people were, I was a piece of fucking shit. I wasn't contributing anything to society. I was hanging out with people who didn't contribute anything. We literally were just all about getting high on meth as much as we could to sustain our habit. And when I went into CMA, I was like, okay, these people, I know, you're not like those straight mom and dads. Y'all are just like me. And on top of that, you're sharing you have 6 months. You were where I was at, and somehow you have 6 months now. And I just remember being like, oh my God, that's crazy. Because once I started doing meth, I never was sober off for more than 30 days, until I came into CMA. And I remember coming in and they said, you got to get a sponsor, get a sponsor, get a sponsor. And I worked at the Wolf Camera off Oak Lawn at the time. And one of the customers, who's a very eccentric older gentleman, John Ader, he would come in with his artistic photography at the little photo kiosk. And I would be so spun. He'd show me stuff and I'd be like, oh, that's rad, man. And we'd do whatever. And one day I was I had quit that job and I was leaving and I was crying because I was so upset. I was crashing off meth, and he was at the dry cleaners and he's like, hey honey, what are you doing? And I was just oh, and I started telling him about my problems, and I was like, oh, you don't care, and I just walked off. And then fast forward 3 months, I had gone to that CMA meeting. I was encouraged to go to AA because it's the same disease, and at the time, CMA only met I think 3 days. They had 3 meetings all week, and I remember going in there and I was like, oh my God, this is so weird, because it's this, I was used to the underground social circle of tweakers, and then it's this underground social circle of people who aren't tweaking and are sober and stuff. And I remember seeing him there, and it was really refreshing because he was a person who I had kind of seen out in the real world, who actually was a cool person. I came in and I was like, oh, he's actually not a jackass. He's actually somebody who I want to get to know better. And I had asked him to be my sponsor. I remember I had a resentment because he had told me to meet him at Starbucks, because it just was everybody kept on, get a sponsor, get a sponsor, get a sponsor. So he was the only person I knew. So I said, will you be my sponsor? And he said, well, why don't we meet up this weekend at Starbucks? And this is the fucking butt crack of summer. I still don't have a car. He's wanting to meet at 1 p.m. It's hot as fucking shit. And, I walked from my apartment to that Starbucks. And, I had the willingness. And we sat down, and it was the one over there off Night. And we sit down, and every 30 seconds, somebody's like, hey, John. Hey, John. And I'm like, is he a famous photographer? Because I was everybody knows who he is. And I was just how do you know all these people? And he's like, oh, we're all, friends of Bill. And I was just oh, okay, well, whatever. And then I was well, he's like, so what's going on, honey? And I was just well, I was going to ask you to be my sponsor. And he's just well, I would, honey, but I already have 10 sponsees, so I'm so sorry, I can't sponsor you. And I just remember being so fucking pissed off, because I'm bitch, I fucking walked here. It's 110 degrees outside. You could have fucking told me this before I came here. But, one of the people who he was just hey, how are you, was leaving with their coffee, and he had broke the news to me, and I just said, okay, so I was oh, hey, well, will you be my sponsor? And it just happened to be somebody who I had never seen before. I knew they were in the program, but I had that willingness. And, this person had said yes, and He took me through the 12 steps. He encouraged me to do 90 and 90. I was willing to do it. He told me to call him every day. I told him I didn't have a cell phone. I don't have a phone, like a landline. He actually gave me a phone card, and at the time I was at the apartment behind Racetrack off Mahana, and he's like, there's a payphone there. I want you to go there every day and use this calling card and call me. And I really, really did not want to do it because I think I didn't want to be a burden in a way, and I also didn't think like I was important enough to like talk to you about my problems. And but I did it, and he would say all the things that we're encouraged to do when we're new, and I did all of them except for participate in the fellowship. I would come late, and when y'all got up to hold hands, I got up to go to the door. And keep in mind, I still was walking all the time. I can't tell you how many of y'all motherfuckers stopped on the road while I'm walking to my apartment and offered to give me a ride. And I would say no every single time because I didn't want to accept your help because I was used to like a tit for tat thing, like out among drug users. And I was like, I don't want to be indebted to you. So no, I'm not going to take your offer. And, I eventually, life started to get better. I was able to start paying my own bills. I got a job. I crossed the threshold of 30 days without meth, which was like, holy shit. Like for me, that was like a miracle. And I remember he would always like invite me to do stuff, to fellowship with dinner afterwards, to do stuff, and I would always decline. But I would always meet up with him for step work, but that was like my boundary. And, life started to get a lot better, and I remember I got a paycheck, and I was like, okay, well, I already have my rent paid. This is disposable income. And I remember thinking, I'm gonna drink because, I never had a problem with drinking. I was a crystal meth addict, and my experience with that is you don't get to pick and choose your vices. If you have a chemical dependency, it does not work like that. It is black and white. And I started drinking, and I was out for 2 years. I guess I probably went out in 2006. I had about a year sobriety, and I met up with him, and he asked me, did I want to stop drinking? And I said, I didn't want to stop drinking from the beginning because I never drank. So it's kind of hard, to ask somebody to give up something that they didn't do. You know what I mean? There's like habits that I don't do currently. If you told me to give it up, it's like, okay, but I don't do that. So it's not hard. But with meth gone, I kind of justified it in my brain, and I started drinking. It wasn't really bad, at the beginning, but it was progressive. And, I started to do that same old system. I'm only going to drink on payday Friday. I'm only going to drink on every Friday. I'm only going to drink on Friday and Saturday because it's still the weekend. And eventually it just kept, my week just became filled with more and more drinking until, I knew I was fucked, basically. But it's funny how people can say one little thing and they probably don't even recall saying it, but it just rings in your head. And I remember the last time I met with him, and he said, well, do you have a desire to stop drinking? I said, no. And he said, okay, well, fair enough. But if it gets bad enough again, you know where to go. And that little sentence just rung in my head. And every time I would drink and have a hangover, I would think about that. If it gets bad enough, you know where to go. And, for me, AA has been the only thing that's ever worked for me in staying sober. And eventually I reached a point where I was willing to come back. That was in, summer 2008. And I asked him to be my sponsor again. Throughout the time of my drinking, I would text him periodically when I was totally shit-faced, and I'd be like, oh my God, it's really bad. I need to get sober again. And he'd be like, are you drinking? And I would say, yes, I can't stop. And he'd say, text me in the morning, we'll meet up and we'll get together. And then the morning would come over and I'd be like totally hungover. He'd text me. And you know how it is when you've been drunk texting? And I'd read it and I'd be like, oh my God, what the fuck did I send that to him for? And then he'd text me, he'd be like, hey, I'm on my way over. And I'd be like, oh no, I'm so sorry. Like, I just was having a moment. I probably did that to him like 10, 15 times. He's probably so sick of my shit. But, the willingness, it was harder this time. It was a lot harder because I wasn't such a low bottom, user, that the manageability was harder for me to get on board with. I thought I was just kind of being dramatic and I just kind of had a rough weekend and whatever, but this was still manageable. And, eventually I came back in and I asked him to be my sponsor and he said yes. And you did really great the first go around. He said, you did everything I asked except for participate in the fellowship. He said, I would like you to try to participate in the fellowship more this time. And I knew deep down that that's why I had gone out the first time. I was bored. It was a weekend. I was lonely in my apartment. I didn't have any friends. I had dropped all my addict friends, but I didn't replace them with healthy friends. And, I honestly did not want to do it. And, from like spring of 2008 to like all summer, I would come in, I'd get a week, and then I'd be out for a week drinking. And then I'd come in for 2 weeks, and then I'd be out for 2 weeks drinking. And it was back and forth. And, finally I realized I needed to do something different. And, I remember after the meeting ended, everybody would go to like Cafe Express or wherever to fellowship. And there was somebody who I'd met who we'd become friends. And we started going together. And I was like, he's kind of my safe person. Like if he's there, like I feel okay going. And, I started participating in the fellowship. I worked all the steps and, at this point, I had gotten a new sponsor. I'd been around enough to see somebody whose like program I admired. And, I started working the steps. And I think for me, that month, like that 30-day chip was so hard to get. Oh my God, it was so hard to get because I would constantly get like 2 weeks out, 3 weeks out, 1 week out. And I remember getting that 30-day chip was like one of the hardest things I've ever done. And in addition to that, my last time drinking, I felt so low for like a solid week. And like it was like a hangover that lasted like a solid week. And every time I would think about going out, I'd be like, oh God, what if it's a week again? And then like on top of that, I'll have to get 30 days again. And that was so hard. I didn't want to do it. So I would use that to not pick up again. And, honestly, life started to get a lot better. I started having friends. I started having a social life. And I was actually like comfortable around these people and like didn't feel like I needed to escape or run away from myself or, liberate my personality with like drugs and alcohol. I worked the steps and, before I knew it, I had a year. And I remember my sponsor encouraging me, no big changes my first year. And I'm so glad I listened to him because it wasn't exactly a year, it was probably like 11 months or something. I started dating somebody who was fucking batshit crazy. And had I dated this person 3 months into sobriety, I can almost guarantee you I would not have stayed sober. I didn't change my job my first year. Had I changed my job, I probably would have lost the job that I had, that I had gotten 1 year into sobriety. I didn't move until I had 1 year sobriety. And I think the important thing is just to kind of be secure in your program and your routine. And, you're going through so much personal change, like you don't need to, add any other stressors. I've gone through so much sober. My sobriety date's September 23rd, 2008. I've walked in on a partner cheating on me. I stayed sober. What I did is I went to the next available meeting. I hung on to the bottom of my seat. I called my sponsor. He was like, "When's the next meeting?" And I got to that meeting, and I went to as many meetings as I needed to not drink. In a way, AA became kind of my self-medication. I used to self-medicate with drugs and alcohol, and now instead of running to drugs and alcohol, I run to AA, and it works for me because, I'm happy, I'm joyous and free. And, my dad passed, 6 years ago. I didn't think that was something I could stay sober through. I got the news, I suited up, I showed up, I was there for my mom, and, what did I do? I got to the next available meeting that I could get to, and, I didn't have to pick up a drink. So, I love AA. I don't ever plan on leaving. I don't want to leave. When I see people like, Steve Whitley, Steve Copeland, like Chris Foley, like people who've just been around, like anybody who's been around, like since I came in, because when I came back, I would see people and I'm like, this bitch is still here? I was like, it didn't click to me like that people like y'all, like I had left and I thought y'all kind of carried on with your lives too. Y'all were still coming. Like that was just like mind-boggling to me. But that's what I aspire to be. I want to be somebody who, somebody one day says like, oh my God, that bitch was still here. But anyways, okay, I think that's about all I have to say. So anyways, thank you.